Welcome back to Revival Recap. I am here with Eddie Tait, and finally, you got to speak a message. How many times has it been in a row that you did not get to preach?
The last 2 times in a row.
Yeah, you were scheduled to speak, get to church, God shows up, and we just worship and do ministry for the whole entire service, and you never got to speak. But this week you did, but you almost didn't, because during worship, just the presence of God was so strong. You guys said, you and Joaquin said you felt the anointing for miracles come into the room, and you thought, I'm probably not going to get to speak again.
Yeah, when he got up and started releasing just, words of knowledge and healing, and people started things started going, people were getting healed left and right. And then you could just feel the increase of like, oh, this is going to keep going for a while. And I'm fine with that. I don't need to preach about something that's manifesting in the room. It's like, I'd rather have him there. But it was funny. It was like, well, all right, God.
But you did get to speak. We're gonna get to that in a minute. But I wanted to just talk over this testimony that was written in from Saturday night, I think it was from that time during worship when Joaquin was praying for people. So one of the ladies in our church, her mom, she walked into the church with a cane and walked out without it.
Right.
Totally cane free. She is going to send us the entire testimony, but we're going to give you guys what we have so far. So long story short, she had severe complications with her lungs due to being on a ventilator twice. She had a limp due to surgeries to repair fractured pelvis, broken hip, and spinal fusion, frequent pain in her body, and more. But her breathing is no longer labored and shallow. Her range of motion is better. She climbed 3 flights of stairs to her daughter's apartment and climbed them with ease. The pain in her body has reduced. Her creative miracle is still in process. She's continuing to be healed, but there's going to be more miracles to report. Another significant piece to this story is that her mom's a prophetic artist, but because of all her pain, because of all the stuff she's been through, she had to stop painting.
Right.
She couldn't paint what God was giving her, the pictures. And but one of our painters, Genevieve, put a paintbrush in her hand, prayed for her, and we have a picture of Mom is just holding the paintbrush on face down on the floor, absolutely wrecked. But basically, God's given her back her paintbrush and her ability to paint and freedom to paint. And so, but one other thing. She said her mom sat down at the end of the service after a wonder-filled night. She felt God smile and heard him say, "How do you like me now?" And all she could do was laugh and smile back and thank God for answering her prayer in a way that only he could do. And that was just... That's just worship.
One of them.
This is why you almost didn't get to preach, because stuff like this was happening.
And I'm okay with that, but God is so good. He did that to multiple people throughout the service. And we love it when people send those in, because it gives us the idea to see and hear from the people themselves of this is what God did this night. So good.
I just heard that there's volunteers all over at church that are serving, from the parking lot to the greeters to the children to everywhere, book table, all of it. Like there's just people serving, working, volunteering. Well, apparently the parking lot people were out in the parking lot, and before they're putting everything away, getting ready to come into church, and they took communion and started praying. And one of the guys is apparently just getting wrecked by God in the parking lot. So one of the other team comes over, can see something's going on, comes over, and they have this whole powerful ministry time. There's tears, there's weeping, there's prophetic, there's all this stuff happening in the parking lot. And it's like, these guys almost didn't make it into church either.
I love it.
Because they're having revival in the parking lot because they decided to take communion while they're putting the cones or whatever it is they're, all the parts.
That's what it's about. It's about not thinking that, church is happening off of a stage from a person speaking to you.
Yeah.
It's like we do church everywhere we live, breathe, everything we do. And I love that the community is actually grabbing a hold of that for themselves. It's not about a man, a preacher, a leader. It's about God.
Yeah.
And I can encounter him anywhere, anytime. And I love it. It's so good.
All right.
So good.
I know. I'm so pumped. I was reading a couple other ones like, oh, this is good. One was from a couple weeks back, so I'm not going to talk about it today, but it was also very, very good. But you did get to preach.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Ennie's message. I really want you to unpack a couple of things.
Okay.
It felt to me like this was, you obviously have some build up.
Yeah.
From not being able to speak. Like, okay, I was at one point I'm like, you're just pounding us over and over with these thoughts from God. But you talked about the verse Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. In all your ways acknowledge him, he'll make your path straight. But right before that is you talked about leaning not on our own understanding. And so you talked about leaning is what, it's like leaning on the table. You want to make sure that what you're leaning against is not your own understanding, but it's actually God's. And here's what you said. You said, my understanding can limit me to expect the situation to be resolved in the way I want it to. And I would add, and the timing that I want it to.
So.
This is one of your life messages. I know you and I have talked about this, but the difference between expectations and expectancy. And you didn't fully go there, but you said, if I lean on my own understanding, I'm limited to expectations.
You're right.
It's got to happen this way at this time. It's almost like it's not good. But trust doesn't have expectations. It has expectancy for him to show up when I ask.
Yeah.
Will you just unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah. It's that idea that when I take a hold of the responsibility or the expectation that things are going to happen the way I want them to, or even have set up in my mind that God's going to do it a certain way, what I've done is I've actually made God my servant in that situation by saying, God, this is what I'm requiring of you because I know who you are, so I require this of you, which is really not the way we want to do it. And it's easy to fall into that trap. I think all of us probably do, but I even gave the analogy of a vending machine. It's like, oh, I have a need. God, I know you answer my needs, so here, I'm going to pray, where's my need? Give me my need back. Trusting and leaning into him, but knowing that he's perfect and he's good, and having the expectancy that when I pray, something happens. I don't have to go past that thought.
Yeah.
I don't have to lean into, when I pray, this is going to happen in this way. It's when I pray, something happens.
Yeah.
Because he's a good father and he loves me and he's always going to do something. It may not look the way I want it to. And I know in my life, thank God it hasn't.
Exactly.
There have been times when I'm like, God, I know what I need from you. And, I think he's up there going,
you have no clue
you have no clue
what you need.
I make the joke sometimes that, people say God comes in the 11th hour. I'm like, my God shows up at 1:30 sometimes. I'm like, hey, I've been done and past my need.
Yeah.
You weren't there.
Yeah.
And then he shows up and I'm like, oh, if you'd have done it the way I expected, I'd be in the same place, not growing or moving forward. You actually provided an opportunity for me to see your plan instead of mine. So...
And you talked about that. That's where trust is developed.
Yeah.
That's
in
where
the mystery.
in the mystery.
Yep.
I actually don't know how you're going to do this. I don't know when you're going to do this. I'm not trying to figure that out.
Yep.
I'm trusting.
Yep. I don't want to limit God to my thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can understand all of God and I actually get to where even in my relationship with him, I don't want my relationship with him to be so static that I know everything about him, because it's no longer a growing relationship. It's information it's learned, and there's no growth and development in it. I want to have the mystery. I mean, in a marriage, I want to have those times when I want to constantly know my wife, my spouse. I want to constantly learn more about her. And God, I mean, think about the depth and width of who God is. Yeah. I don't ever want to think that I've gotten to a place where I know everything about him, because now he's limited to what I can think. Yeah. And that's not a good place.
And it's almost like, when you're in the place of, I don't actually know you, you get to know him better.
Oh, he reveals himself.
And you talked about that, the humility and stuff like that. But before we get into that part, oh my goodness. You talked about our tongues, our words, our thoughts, and you said this one line. I know it's your favorite line in the whole message, and I think it was one of mine. Actually, the next one is my favorite. But you said, and this goes off, Joaquin talked about this in his last message, and then Renee spoke, but Joaquin's last message, he talked about, like the keyboard and Facebook and social media and the life and death and the power of the tongue. That authority doesn't stop when you get on the keyboard. Like, it just because it's not coming out of our mouths doesn't mean it's not coming out here. And you've sort of like continued that thought a little bit about the way we think, the way we speak. And you said, if we are the temple of God, what sound is coming out of our doorway? That's a good one.
You know, it's just, we are the temple of God. He's in us. But the outflow of the mouth is what the heart's filled with.
Yeah.
You know, and we use the word mouth, but like Joaquin said, it's like whatever we're expressing in whatever way it is, because we understand that language doesn't have to be just verbal.
Yeah.
Body language, there's all kinds of language. You know, written language is actually, in this day and age, is probably more prominent than your voice.
Yeah.
But what's the sound coming out of you? If you're honestly carrying the presence of God inside of you, it should be that presence coming out of you. It should be a sweet sound. When you speak, it should bring glory to Him. It shouldn't bring conflict or contradictory thoughts or division. And, you know, in this day and age, it feels like people are trying to have a voice that matches their circumstances and surrounding. It's like, well, society says this, so I'm going to lend my voice either to or against what society's saying. And that's not where we should be coming from. Our voice should not come laterally to these things. It should come from the heavenlies.
Yeah.
Our voice should be that voice coming out and saying, you know, Joshua comes up in the angel and he's like, who are you? Are you for us or for our enemy? No.
Yeah.
I stand in the army of the Lord. It's like, no.
Yeah.
He doesn't actually have a voice here. He speaks on behalf of God.
Yeah. This is good. So I've been noticing, because we're doing these revival recaps, I'm really tracking along all the messages that we've been sharing, speaking, and it looks to me like, from Joaquin, probably Renee as well, but now you, it looks to me like in most places, many churches probably, the congregation comes and the pastor is saying, here's what God is saying about this, here's what God is doing about this, here's what God is saying about COVID, here's what God is saying about this situation, that situation, here's what, and the pastors are kind of speaking into each scenario, situation, and it almost feels like we're not saying, here's what God is saying. We're saying, and I'm looking back at many sermons, instead of going, here's what God is saying to all these, it's almost like we're wanting you to go to God for what He's saying.
Yeah.
Why do you, like, I think I know, because I know this, our world and stuff like that and our mindsets, but why is it that we're saying, hey church, go to God. Hey church, to use Joaquin's language before, jump tracks. There's 2 tracks going on. Get off one, get on the other. Hey, it seemed like Joaquin was on that theme for a little bit of like, get off the tracks that the devil's tracks, get on the Lord's tracks. Steal, kill, destroy, but life and life more abundantly. And you're kind of aiming people at like, hey, get in the Word, get in prayer. We're going to talk about prayer in a minute. Hey, what's coming out of your mouth? What are you speaking? Are you just speaking to this situations, or are you speaking from here? Are you hearing God's voice, or are you just reacting to this? And I just look at the whole context. I'm like, oh, we're doing something completely different than probably a lot of churches. We're not just speaking directly at these things. We're telling people, you go to God. You get in the zone, in the spot. You get on the right track. You get on His track. You get in His thoughts. You get His voice. So why do you think that is? What are you doing when it comes to that?
Yeah.
Like, what's the reason for that?
You know, and I this message, of course, just with the amount of stuff that's stirring, I could have taken one point and probably unpacked a whole service on it. And I touched on it a little bit, that analogy of God talking about getting into focus with the eye doctor. so many of us want someone to tell us what to say or think. And culturally, we've actually been programmed to learn from someone else instead of actually have our own development, internal development and internal direct relationship. I think we're really trying to equip the body, our direct family, that's who we have direct contact with. But honestly, I want to see the body of Christ have that relationship and perspective from the heavenlies to where they're not relying on anybody, that they are the source. And I really think that that's where we're going to as a church. And I mean, church is in every believer.
Yeah.
I still, and I've been saying this for months, I believe that we are on the cusp of the greatest revival we've ever experienced. But it's going to require people to have that direct relationship and that perspective from heaven to actually invite that. You know, we've been invited into this process, and it was that whole, hey, God's actually showing us one of two options.
Yeah.
Your involvement or non-involvement.
Yeah.
He wants us involved. But if I'm the one giving everybody the information and telling everybody what they should be thinking, they're actually not involved, they're following.
Yeah.
Every one of us is called to lead in our own sphere.
It's kind of like, shepherds don't actually feed sheep.
Right.
Shepherds lead sheep to where the grass is, and the sheep feed themselves.
Yep, that's right.
And you said the word equip, and that's what I feel like is happening as watching the last few weeks, couple months, whatever it's been, like, it feels like there's this equipping happening of like, this isn't us just speaking into every situation. This is us equipping you to hear God in every situation, for every situation, to get equipped. And I love that. Yeah. I've just been noticing it. I'm like, I'm going to ask Eddie today about this, because I'm like, it's different than what I see in other places. Yeah. That's okay. So you're wanting people to have that relationship with God, connection with God. You also said it's really important to have people around us.
Yep.
So, and some people are so, God told me this, that they actually use their relationship with God to somehow eliminate people from their lives or isolate, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing two things, which I can't wait for you to unpack this, and I love this kind of stuff. I was like, okay, we're equipping you to have your own relationship with God, and you don't want your relationship with God to isolate you from the voices of other people and the counsel of other people and having healthy people around your lives. Will you speak into that?
I think
this is a...
And it's funny because I think this goes into, and most of us know that you can find throughout Scripture, there's always, people look at it and they say, oh, well, it contradicts itself. It never contradicts itself. It actually completes itself. It's two sides to the same truth.
Yeah.
And it's perspective, it's situational, it doesn't matter, but it's the same thing here. You have to have people in your lives, and you have to be open to that relational equity that God has actually put around you. You have to have voices in your life.
Yeah.
But they should never supersede God.
Yeah.
But they should also never eliminate that, or God's voice should never eliminate those relationships either. So there's that balance. And I sometimes don't even like the word balance.
Yeah.
Because balance seems like the wrong word. It's like there needs to be an understanding of both sides of that truth. And when we eliminate the voices in our lives, we've actually elevated ourselves up to not be able to grow with the people God's put in our lives. And it's a very unhealthy place because you can find yourself falling astray, and those voices he's put in your life are actually there to kind of be that nudge back into alignment.
Yeah.
But then the flip side is, if we're only going to people and we haven't developed that intimacy or that relationship with God, we're actually using God to validate what people are saying instead of actually validating what he says with people. And that's a huge challenge for us as people, is to not actually go to our resources here first.
Yeah.
It's like, no, my first place is here to God. And now my friends, Seth, this is what I feel God's saying. No, I don't know about that. Okay. Now I've got to actually weigh that out. My relationships with my friends, my relationships with my pastor, my friends, my spouse.
Yeah.
I weigh those things out, but I don't go, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. Okay, can I find a verse that matches now what I've decided I believe?
Right.
I'm not going to use him to validate myself. I'm going to actually get from him and then validate, justify, or actually, find the truth with people that I trust in my life.
Yeah.
People that have a voice. And it's smart to have people in your life that you don't always agree with.
Yes.
Because you want people that are real. They're going to be truthful whether you like it or not or agree or not.
Yeah.
And to me, some of the best relationships I have are with people that I don't agree with, but we love each other enough to continue a relationship, and we actually grow in that way.
Yeah. I actually had a conversation not too long ago with someone that it seemed like they were working really hard to make sure they never actually hurt anyone.
Ooh.
And I remember a friend told me years and years ago, he said, I don't actually want to hurt you, but I will if you need it. I will tell you if you're off. I will tell you, I will do surgery on you. And that's what you're talking about. Is those kind of people. We're not looking to hurt people or get hurt by people, but we're looking for people who are willing to say, hey, I think, no.
Yeah.
Hey, you're talking to God, and you need to talk to us, and we'll help you. But you go there first, but you also have people in your life.
And I think a key to that is that if I'm going to correct you or give you some sort of advice that I think you're off on, I have one of two things I'm trying to accomplish. I'm either trying to be right or I'm trying to help you.
Yeah.
If my goal is to be right in the situation, I'm automatically lost.
Yeah.
My goal isn't to be right. My goal is to give you what I'm feeling, discerning what I know, and then walk with you through the process of you deciding whether or not you're going to take that.
Yeah.
It's more about being connected than being right. And we've talked about that in other aspects, but it's every relationship should have that. Correction should be about not being right. It should be about being close. So,
come on, this is good. I like this. Threw a little curveball at you there. All right, so my favorite part of the message is when you talked about 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Okay, I've never seen this, never thought this, but you dropped this. You said our land needs healing. Are you praying for the land to be healed, or are you seeking his face?
yeah.
Don't put the target of your prayers on the problem. That's not where the solution is. Put the target of your prayers on the one who is the solution. Then the problem no longer matters. And I've read that verse a lot, heard a lot of people preach on that verse. I've never heard this. I've watched many people, they pray for God to heal the land, but God is not saying, pray for me to heal the land. He's saying, I'll heal the land, seek my face. Talk more about that.
Yeah. And that's two sides of the same truth, because we're called to intercede. We're called to pray for change. We're called to pray for our leaders. We're called to pray for all these things.
Yeah.
But very specifically, we're more directed in everything we see throughout Scripture. We're directed to him, not the problem.
Yeah.
And when you if we're praying for our land to be healed, what we're doing is we're praying for the problem. If we're praying for our land to be blessed, that's a different heart posture. And I'm not praying for my land to be blessed because I see the healing, and I'm not praying towards the lack. I'm praying towards the promise. Where does the promise come from? His face.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that gives the promise. So when I seek his face, if all of my attention is towards him, he has told us, and this is one example, but there's so many examples where he's told us, come to me and I'll take care of everything that you need.
Yeah.
And we have to look at Scripture and not try to just read the words that are on the page and think that that's it. And you and I have talked about this, but the depth of Scripture, and the same verse will speak over and over and over to different situations.
Yeah.
And I've read this before and actually preached messages on praying for the land, praying for things that, it's like, it's a promise he gave us that he'll heal our land. So we're praying for that. It's like, oh man, that's not what he said.
Yeah.
What he said is humble yourself, which is huge.
Yeah.
People are challenged to actually pray. I actually thought about that years back. It's like, wow, prayer isn't difficult. Prayer is prideful.
No.
To not pray.
To not pray.
To not pray is prideful.
Yeah.
So prayer is humility.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's not difficult. It's humbling myself.
Yeah.
Because prayer is, and that's
what
it says. It's like,
right
if my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face. So going to him first is actually one of the most disarming things to our pride that we can do. And it equips us to step into a place where everything that we're actually thinking we need. Because need is usually coming out of a place of recognizing lack.
Yeah.
So when we have our needs around us, whether it's personal, relational, financial, social, governmental, political, whatever it is, when we have our needs and we see our needs, we're actually seeing what we think needs to change. Well, the reality is all we have to do is get closer to him, seek his face, get eye to eye with him, and then all of a sudden, those things don't carry the same weight because we realize, oh, you actually are in control anyways.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, and I've said this before, I'm really trying to figure this one out, and this is a process I'm in, but I honestly believe that sometimes when we look at our situations, the problem is that we look at the situation, whereas if I'm looking in his eyes, if you've ever looked in somebody's eyes, there's a reflection.
Yeah.
What if we're supposed to see all of our circumstances in the reflection of his eyes rather than directly?
Yeah.
That's an amazing thought. And it's like, if I'm looking in his eyes, all of a sudden I see all of the circumstances and situations through his eyes, which they no longer mean the same thing.
Yeah.
No.
The things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace,
come on.
the light of his wonderful face.
Yep.
And another side of that is I've had those times where seeing Jesus, actually, like seeing who he is and how big he is, has helped me actually keep the problems in perspective.
Yes.
Like, man, I could tell story after story, but I had this encounter with God where Jesus is like 1,000 feet tall. He's so tall, his heads are in the cloud. We're praying for a kid that's got seizures every day. And I look at Jesus and I see how big he is. And then he looks at this thing on the ground and I look down and it's an ant with the word seizure. And for me, there's more to the story, but all I'm trying to say is I was looking at the seizures. I'm like, help, Lord. Oh, help. That's all I had the faith for.
Right.
Was go, oh, help. I don't know what to do. Like, never even seen this before. Look at Jesus, and all of a sudden, the problem gets put in its proper perspective.
Yep.
It's like, oh, you're really big. And that's not as big as I thought it was when I see it the way you see it, which is exactly what you're talking about. But that whole thing, it also gives us his faith.
Yes.
Instead of us, we actually receive the faith of God because we see the problems the way he does. We see how big he is, how powerful he is, who he actually is. We see him and we go, whoa. And then we see the problems through his eyes and we're like, oh, now I believe like you do.
Yeah.
Now I have your faith, not just my faith, my ideas, my understanding. I'm not leaning on my own understanding, my ideas, how I think this should be done. Whoa, I see you.
Yep.
Now I believe the way you believe.
Yeah.
There's an impartation that happens in this as well.
Yeah. What we focus
faith.
on grows.
Yeah.
And when we see him and he grows, it diminishes all other things.
This is so good.
Yeah.
Okay. One other thing we talked about a little bit ago before we started filming is a lot of times people's relationship with God is just intercession, and it's almost removed intimacy.
Right.
Not that intercession is bad. Obviously, it's not bad. Obviously, it's important. Obviously,
Right.
it matters. But in the context of this as well, if your relationship with God is based on intercession, you may push out intimacy. You may push out that seeking his face. And so having that intimate time and watching what he does and then partnering with him in intercession is a whole different deal. But I wanted to ask you practically, How do we do that?
I think a lot of it is, we talk about making sure, especially in times like this, it becomes more evident that you need to have more of the input of God in your life, either through prayer, worship, soaking, reading the word, whatever it is. It's easy in these times to say we obviously need more of that. But I think there's also the aspect of when you're praying, make sure that you're praying in a thankful, exalting, like you're praying towards him, admiring, acknowledging, worshiping, and just saying, this is who you are. I'm so thankful for who you are. I'm not thankful for what you did. I'm thankful for who you are. I think if we can appropriately put more of our prayer life towards him for his goodness instead of towards a target of something we want fixed, changed, or even blessed. There's nothing wrong with praying for blessing, but if I'm praying for blessing, I still have to manage in my heart. Am I praying because I see lack, or am I praying because I see his goodness? If I keep my attention on his goodness, my prayers actually come out of the overflow of what I'm praying towards him instead of almost a vacuum, like, hey, I need more of you to fix this thing or to take care of this situation. And I think really practically intercession is I think everyone's called to intercede, but then there are people that are truly intercessors. Yeah. And I've watched intercessors, and some of them are really healthy, and some of them really, they almost live a heavy life because what they've done is they've put their prayers towards the target that they've taken the burden of those and put it on, and they're
playing God.
Opposite of what he says to do. So when we can appropriate our prayers towards him for his goodness, for his holiness, for adoration and exaltation and all this, that actually keeps us healthy, because the overflow of those prayers, they fall over onto all the things that we thought we were supposed to be putting targets on.
Yeah. That's where partnership comes in. Yep. You're not leaning on your own understanding. Acknowledging in all your ways, acknowledge him. He will make your path straight.
Yes.
He will direct your path.
Come on.
Man, that's good.
Love it.
Anything else you want to say?
Oh, man. This is going to be
unpacked. You got many more sermons.
This is going to be unpacked.
And we haven't even talked. There's more to the message, but this was a full message for me. And I told you before we started recording, I got rid of half my notes for this message because I realized there's too much. And I could have taken one topic and done a whole sermon on it. Yeah. So this is probably going to be an ongoing, I don't do series, but it's going to be an ongoing kind of message coming out of me. Yeah, just because there's so much in this right now. It feels like this is a really important word for the season.
Yeah.
And we're in.
And it's funny. I made the comment, but it seems the reality. I don't preach as much as I process. I process with the church, because this is what I've been doing for the last several months. And these are the revelations and the God's nudging me on, hey, have you noticed that you're doing this? Oh, man, okay. I need to change this. I need to course correct. That conviction thing. It's like, conviction is an invitation, not a condemnation.
Come on.
So, I love it.
Good.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Well, Eddie, thank you for this message. And everything you said, just super impactful. Thanks for equipping us, not just telling us how to think, but equipping us to connect with God and get his thoughts. I really appreciate that. I know everybody out there does as well. So, guys, thanks for joining us on Revival Recap. We'll be back again next week after service on Saturday night. If you haven't joined us in person, you're welcome to. We have all the precautions in place. We have kids' church going with all the precautions. We have adult service going with all the precautions. We even have equipped classes happening in person with all the precautions as well. So follow us at Bethel ATX for all the information, BethelATX.com for all the information, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, where you can find out everything that's going on. But in-person services are obviously back.
They're back.
They're obviously good. The Lord is moving, and we'd love for you to join us whenever you're ready. We love you guys, and thanks for watching or listening.
God bless you.
We'll see you soon.